Hey, everybody. Welcome to Over Coffee, a podcast with John Doring and Larry Davis. We talk about hope and inspiration and stories from amazing people. And today I've got just a great friend of mine, Lauri Tanner, who is the CEO of Treasure House. Treasure House is a not-for-profit here in the Valley, started by Kurt and Brenda Warner. And Lauri kind of runs the show. You want to tell us a little bit about what it is? And then we'll kind of get into where the hope and the inspiration comes from that.
Absolutely. Treasure House is a supported living residence. So for 25 young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Right.
And it is a place where our residents are encouraged and coached and mentored to be the most independent that they can possibly be.
Sure.
And it's just such a vibrant community because, I mean, everybody wants to have a vibrant life.
Yeah.
It's not just limited to people who are typically developing.
Sure.
So just to be able to just see the growth and the excitement amongst these young adults is really fantastic.
Yeah. And when you say young adults, I mean, some of them are a little bit older, right?
Yes. Young at heart adults. Maybe I've got to change my lingo. Our residents range in age. We started out actually from 18 to 35.
Okay.
And we just didn't know where to start. We were blazing a trail. This is a little over 5 years ago now. And so we thought 18 to 35 was kind of a good place. And I talked to a woman from north of Detroit, Michigan on the phone about an hour and a half into the call. She starts crying. And I said, Lisa, why are you crying? Is it because you're happy or sad? She says, I'm both. And I said, okay, well, let's start with happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she said, well, I feel like I found the perfect place for Nick.
Right.
I said, well, that's awesome. Tell me why you're sad. And she said, he's too old.
Oh.
And I said, well, how old is he? And she said, 36. And my reply was 35-ish. But I learned so much from Nick.
Sure.
Because what we've learned is that number of your age, 36 versus 35 versus 18, is not really what's important at Treasure House. It's where our young adults live.
Right.
You know, just emotionally and intellectually and those kind of things. The birth date almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Today, our oldest resident's 51.
That's
our
fantastic.
youngest resident is 18.
Right.
And they all get along just fine.
Yeah. So it's crazy. We've had amazing guests on the show, and it's been their story about inspiration and hope. And you have your own personal story as well. But the thing that's fantastic is like you get to see these folks every day that have developmental disabilities, that life could be just horrible, right? I mean, it could be nothing and have no hope and no inspiration. But because of Treasure House, they do. You know, so what are some of the things that they absolutely love? I mean, I'm sure it's the communal living, but I mean, they get jobs. They do a whole bunch of great things.
It's really very interesting. Sometimes I get to work at 7:30 in the morning and we already have a group out at the table.
Sure.
They might not be going to work for they're having their coffee.
Yeah.
They might not be going to work yet for another hour and a half, but they're already, getting together, chatting up and just excited to be together. I know almost 90% of our residents are employed.
Right.
21% is the national average
That's
for
amazing.
Adults with disabilities in the country.
Sure.
And so we're beating that with our life coaching model.
Right.
And one of the first questions I ask residents when they're interviewing to come into Treasure House or they've already decided that this is a good fit, I said, tell me what your dream job is. Well, that's the same interview question that I use with people who are applying for employment with me.
Sure.
And you learn a lot, even though, I've been a nurse for a long time and a leader for a long time and that type of thing. But you find out a lot about what somebody's dream job is. Even as a nurse, what would your dream job? Well, I'd like to be a professional golfer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's work with that for a minute. So, but I've learned so much about what they're passionate about.
Right.
And then I think it's incumbent upon us to make that happen.
Yeah.
At our celebrity game night last fall, it was a rock and roll theme, and my walk-up music was Dreamweaver.
Yeah, I love that.
And I got kind of choked up as I walked up, just thinking that really is my job. I am the person that is responsible to make sure that their dreams come true.
Yeah.
And I take that very, very seriously. So for Nick Valatutti, the same young man who was 35-ish, his dream job was to work at State Farm Stadium.
Yeah. This is the Super Bowl story. I love this.
And he does. And he does fantastic there. And, the Super Bowl was a year ago.
Right.
And he even said to me, do you think they need me in Vegas? And I'm like, they might, Nick.
I love it.
But I mean, he was just so excited to be able to work the Super Bowl. I mean, he had to be at work at 4:30 in the morning. He got home at 10:30 at night.
Oh my gosh.
And he was fired up.
Oh, I bet.
But our residents, they love to go to work. They love to have meaning in their lives.
Sure.
They love to be able to have some cash of their own that they're able to earn on their own.
Sure.
They love being able to be of service and really to have purpose in their life. And otherwise, when you talked about the horrible situation, you're kind of stuck in mom and dad's house. You could be in the basement. You could be in the back room. You're kind of limited to what's, game shows and just all the computer games and that kind of stuff. But that social activity is just so very important. And that's the other thing, in addition to the employment, is our young adults, some of them for the first time have true friends.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So talk to a little bit, like when you have a new resident that comes in, that's got to be such a learning curve, right? I mean, so I would assume they're coming from the home situation like you're talking about, and now all of a sudden, like they're in this community and they have opportunities and jobs and coaching and hanging out, I mean, how does that progress?
Well, even from the beginning, parents will give us a call and say, I have a son or daughter, I'm interested in Treasure House. So it's quite a process to even get to the point to move in, and we really want to be able to get to know the young adult and their family. If they're local, we encourage, we always start out with a tour. You've got to come and see it. The number one key to success for all of our residents, and we've learned this because we've been at it 5 years, is the resident has to want to be there. The young adult has to want to be there. We've had situations where it was really the parents that wanted them to be there. And that didn't always necessarily translate.
Right.
But the resident has to really want to be there. And we're able to find those things like through the tour and how are they connecting with other people. If someone is from out of town, parents will come into town for a few days, and then that young adult will spend some time with us, maybe 5 to 8 hours during the day, and already start to get to know some of the other folks that live there. And usually from that, they get each other's cell phones and they're FaceTiming each other. The last young man that moved in actually is from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
And he already had developed friends, just from the times that he came out to visit.
Sure.
But it's a big change, for Matthew in particular from Los Angeles. He's the oldest of four, and his sisters all were going to college, and he wanted to too.
Yeah.
But college looks a little different for him.
Sure.
And, but he just loves having friends. He loves his job. He works at Walmart. He is ready to go early. He gives it his all.
Sure.
And, again, he really feels like he's contributing, and he's having a blast.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got buddies. A lot of times, through high school, it was even Zach Warner's situation through high school. Now, Zach was not a kid that got bullied when he was in high school. A lot of our residents have been.
I'm sure.
But everybody was nice to him during the day. But once he got home, nobody had anything to do with him.
Yeah.
There was no, let's invite him out to a birthday party. How about going to a basketball game with us, to the movies? None of that.
Oh, wow.
And what's so hard in this day and age is just social media. And you see everybody else having fun. These kids that were nice to you during the day, but you're not okay to be invited, in the evenings. And so, not even one birthday party for Zach.
Oh,
that's crushing.
That is devastating.
That's just crushing. So we make a big deal out about birthdays. So, for residents to really come in and feel like they have friends, and we work really hard, our staff works really hard with the residents so that they learn how to have healthy relationships. And, the romantic ones happen too.
Sure.
My gray hair. But everybody wants to be loved, whether that's a friendship or a romantic situation. You want to have that in your life.
Sure.
So, Lauri, are the families involved with the residents, or is that optional?
Well, there's not a family that's not involved. we do have some residents that don't have families.
Mm-hmm.
So just for instance, on Christmas Day, I stay in town and I cook brunch.
Mm-hmm.
And that way I can serve the resident. It started out with one resident early on that didn't have family. But the other, this last Christmas, I served 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then plus my 2 staff members. But
Sure.
I made brunch. I brought my Christmas china from home and really made sure that they had a brunch that they would have within, because Treasure House is their family.
Right.
So, but many of our parents live out of town. 60% of our residents are not from Arizona.
Sure.
And so, but they do come into town. Almost all of them participate. They were at Celebrity Game Night.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're donors and they want to help support Treasure House. And then, just like the rest of us, some of our residents go home. If it's local, we'll travel to their family's house to have Sunday night dinner, just like anybody else.
Sure.
So, but families are always welcome to come to Treasure House and that type of thing. Our life coaches work closely with the parents as well, because it's a transition for them too.
Yeah, one of the most inspirational stories I've literally ever heard, and you shared it with me, is kind of talking about how Brenda Warner got involved with you and how it progressed. And she just wanted to love on babies, right? And then all of a sudden, here we are,
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that story is just fantastic.
When I met Brenda Warner, she was a third string quarterback's wife.
Yeah.
And it all started out with the community relations person with the St. Louis Rams. Trent
Mm-hmm.
Green was actually out at the place where I was the CEO. And so, Trent is also who got hurt and got Kurt to
Sure.
be the starter. But
Sure. Yeah.
but it was all starts with Trent Green, even for me. And I was talking to the community relations person who said, I have a third string quarterback's wife who has a son with a disability, a 6-year-old and a newborn, and she wants to love on babies and volunteer. And I said, she wants to what?
Yeah.
Well, she's a Marine, she's a nurse, she wants to give back, she really needs that. I said, okay. So I met Brenda shortly after that, and it was a moment, it's a girl thing, but it was a moment that I remember what she was wearing and I remember what I was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And we took a tour, and I had just started a ventilator dependent program, and I had 2 little girls who were ventilator dependent who did not have families. And it was a brand new program. We were a nursing home at that time, but Brenda loved on these 2 girls. And I'm convinced that they lived and they grew up big enough for their lungs
Sure.
to grow because of her love.
It's amazing.
And so she was there 24 to 30 hours a week. I met Kurt about 3 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt was then starting.
Yeah.
And so that was right there in that space. And
I've seen the movie.
yeah, he had something beautiful to say to absolutely every child.
Mm-hmm.
It was an experience to walk along with him as he met these kids, because a lot of times in that world, not all the babies were really pretty.
Yeah.
But he connected in a way that I've never seen, like you saw in the movie where he just automatically lays down on the floor with Zach, who he didn't know.
Yeah.
Knowing Kurt the way I do, that's who he is.
Right.
And he just has such a beautiful heart in that way. And obviously so does Brenda. But she and I she helped me with that, and we grew closer. Then they left St. Louis, and we just never lost touch. And when she had this inspiration for Treasure House, she, calls Kurt first and talks about, while he was still at work with the Cardinals. And he says, can we talk about this when we get home? And then she called me second.
Yeah.
And so I was on the board early on, and she always said that I'd be the CEO of Treasure House.
Right.
Always
Even though
said
you weren't quite sure at that point.
I love Brenda, but it wasn't about that. It was about, I had a pretty good gig where I was. My mom was still alive. My son was in college. There was a lot of things I just didn't see. But ultimately, she was right. So they called me one day, and I had been on the board until May of 18. And then November of 18, they called me. It was pretty much the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, and said, are you available to be our interim CEO? Because we, have had to make a change. And I was gone in 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And, but I knew within 10 days that
Sure.
I was not leaving Treasure House.
Yeah.
So I lived in the house for 9 months before I bought a home and all that type of thing. But Brenda was right. And sometimes I'm just going to say it. I mean, I needed to be moved by God.
Yeah.
I am very convinced that, you know, she told me a number of times, you know, like that one story about, well, you know, God's not helping me. And, you know, it's just I've asked for the boat and all the things. I sent you all this. Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of the same thing for me. But when I got off that plane that morning, when I stepped off, I had this total sense of peace that just hit the top of my body through. And I hadn't even gotten the rental car yet.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I drove out, and the sunsets were another deal for me. But I just fell in love with them.
Right.
And one of our residents said, I was introducing myself to someone. We only had 4 residents at the time. And Pierce said, I wish you wouldn't introduce yourself that way. I said, what way? She goes, interim.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why? And she goes, we don't like that word. I don't like that word. We never want you to leave.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We love you. And she goes, I love you.
That's to the heart, right?
I love you. And I'm like, I can't go.
So this was a resident who said that?
This was a resident that said that she never wanted me to leave. And, you know, it was really in that moment that I knew that Treasure House needed me more than being a CEO of another hospital.
Sure.
So, and I absolutely love what I do. We had 4 residents at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, now we've been full it'll be 3 years in June.
That's great.
And that was with a pandemic in the middle of it. And, you know, the stories are absolutely amazing about the transformation that we have seen, not only for the residents, but for their parents. You know, the life and the peace that it's given them.
Sure.
Because so many of them worry about what happens to my son or daughter when I'm not here. Or, you know, I have other children, and I've had parents sit in my office and just cry because, and these are the words they use, I don't want to burden my other children.
Yeah. Wow.
And they say the word burden, and then they feel bad for saying burden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not bad. It's the truth.
Right.
You know, and I said, but then this way they can just love their son. They can just, or daughter.
Right.
They can just, you know, just enjoy them, and their siblings can just enjoy them and not be in the mix and focused on the task. So it's a transition for parents too, because they're used to the 24/7 grind.
To care, right?
So there's it's not just helping that parent make that pretty big, or the resident making that pretty big change. It's also for the parents.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, because it takes money, right? The world revolves around money. So, I mean, this is hopefully a little bit of a pitch, and some folks will see this, but to run Treasure House, it takes money. So, I mean, what's that process look like? I mean, you're fundraising all the time. You're doing all kinds of different events in the community. I see all that. I love it. But that's got to be a big grind too, right?
Just like this, I love telling the story.
Yeah.
I love telling the story of Brenda's dream and Kurt's massive support for this. I've known Zach since he was 9.
Yeah.
So he's 34 now. And
That's
just to know him as a little boy and see him in this way as well. But it's about sharing their stories.
Yeah.
And I love to tell the stories.
Sure.
I love to tell the story of Treasure House and what we are doing, and that we are cutting edge.
Oh,
we
yeah,
are
without doubt.
doing things that no one else is doing, and kind of blazing our own trail. And, you know, I hate to say it, but there's some truth to it. We've kind of made it up as we go.
Sure.
But I think we're always going to, because I want to be that flexible that it's not like the residents come in and we have the checklist. We got a job, they have friends, they clean their apartment, they do their laundry, they can. No, I want them to be ever evolving, ever growing. You know, just because this is your first job doesn't mean that that's your last job. You know, what else do you want to aspire to do? So we have to be flexible in order to do that.
Right.
So, you know, I'll never have, this is just, you know, the way.
Sure.
You know, when Nick says, I want to work at, you know, I couldn't make the Las Vegas thing happen for him this year. But if the Lions had been there, I probably would have had to try, because he's from Detroit.
Yeah, me
I would
too.
have had
It's
to
heartbreaking.
would have had to find a way for him and his mom and dad to get tickets.
Yeah.
And I would have done whatever I could to do that.
Absolutely.
But, so, you know, the fundraising thing, and I was a little girl that didn't like to sell Girl Scout cookies, you know? I just didn't really like asking people for money, or when I would babysit and the parents would say, how much do I owe? Oh, nothing. It was just a pleasure to take care of your children.
Right.
And I'd done their laundry and, everything.
Yeah.
And, back at the 50 cents an hour days, that I just didn't like that.
Sure.
But I have had no problem, even when I was the CEO of the hospital, advocating for this and for our residents today, to advocate for them.
Right.
Kurt and Brenda want to make it as affordable as possible.
Sure.
So we charge about 48% of what it costs per month to make it as reasonable as possible. And I do fundraise the Gap.
Yeah.
I got to find a fun name for the Gap.
Right.
All I keep thinking is the Gap band and the clothing store, but neither one of them is holding it for me. I have to come up with some other thing. But that Gap per year this budget year is $2.2 million.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's to break even.
Sure.
So, getting out in the community and sharing the stories and making those matches happen where somebody feels passionate about this population. Once somebody tours Treasure House,
it's got to be all over at that point, right?
It's you come in one person, you leave a different one.
Yeah.
So how do people arrange that?
Oh, they just call me.
Call you.
You can just call me or email me at Lauri@treasurehouse.org, or just call into Treasure House and we'll give people tours so that they can see what we do.
Sure.
A lot of times, it's parents that have a son or daughter, but folks that are interested in volunteering or interested in helping in some way. But once you meet them, you really do see the return on your investment.
Yeah.
What I love the most about this last year's Treasure House or Celebrity Game Night really had to do with you could see the outcome.
Yeah.
You could see it, you could feel it. And when Katie's dad, I can tell the stories too, but I love for the residents to tell their own, or I love for the parents. And I asked Katie's dad, because she was transitioning back home to Iowa. And he's a disc jockey for rock and roll. So it worked out perfect. Somebody thought he was dressed in costume with that ponytail. No, that was
That's
real.
Him. I love it.
But he said before Treasure House, Katie had to do 100 things a day perfectly.
Sure.
Before Treasure House, she could do about 7.
Wow. That's amazing.
After staying at Treasure House, he said she can do 95.
That's fantastic.
And not only but he also said about how much they have learned.
Sure.
As parents, so that they can continue now that she's back in the hometown. And they have a really nice condo for her.
Sure.
And she has employment and all these types of things. But they have learned on how to help Katie be successful.
Sure.
That was different than what they were doing when she was doing 7 things right a day.
Yeah.
So, but when he said that, you could just picture it. She did have to do 100 things right a day and really could only accomplish 7.
Yeah, that's hard.
When parents can share that, so many of us are just so fortunate to not be faced with some of these challenges. And I've always, as a nurse, I'm always a nurse first. I have to say that. While I'm always a nurse first. I use my nursing knowledge absolutely every day. But I've always, from a career standpoint, liked taking care of the underdog.
Sure.
I've always liked taking care of people that nobody else wanted to. And, when it was adult medicine, it was oncology. And I usually like to find the most challenging patient there, and got into other things before I went to the neonatal intensive care unit. But the thing that's inspired me today that I want to share is that, our steps really are ordered. And, I was the head nurse of this NICU where, I took care of very low birth weight babies who had brain injuries, who had Down syndrome, who had, respiratory issues and super sick. And then I was the CEO. So I used to save these little guys. And then I was the CEO of a pediatric hospital that really focused on the medically complex. And all of those patients are delayed.
Sure.
And so these little kids that I used to help save their lives, my gift now is that not the same kids, but the same diagnosis that I used to save.
Sure.
Now I can help give them a life that they want and deserve. We've saved these children.
Oh, 100%.
And we have a responsibility to make sure they have a great life.
Yeah.
And so for me, I get goosebumps thinking about that's my inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always, I think being the oldest of 5 and loving my family, I like taking care of families.
Sure.
And it's not just the resident.
Right.
I also work really hard to take care of the parents too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to kind of walk through the whole thing and really, build a future, not just survival, but a future.
Right.
For these young folks.
It's absolutely incredible. So your day-to-day life is just seeing the hope and inspiration and grow. But so tell us a little bit. I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, Treasure House is really needed everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but it's also hope and inspiring that maybe we can get there someday. So
we have a member on our board who has a young son. He's 10 now. People are starting to call us as their children are younger, 10, 11, 12.
We'll see the path. Right?
And what Treasure House has done for them, and they say these words to me, it's given me hope.
Yeah.
Sadie says it. It gives me hope for Andrew later.
Yeah.
That there is growth opportunity.
Sure.
That there is employment opportunity, that there is friendship, and that they'll have a great life.
Yeah.
But it's growing.
Yeah.
This population we're saving kids medically that we weren't able to save. And I mean, when you think about, Down syndrome, a lot of, 20, 30 years ago, they didn't live into their 60s. They do. They just don't. And, brain injury, everything has just changed. And so the need is great and it's growing.
Sure.
But our vision, it has been from the beginning, is that we want to replicate our model across the country.
Absolutely.
So Treasure House Phoenix is our alpha site.
Yeah.
And
number one.
So, I think we've perfected our model in terms of operations and how we manage our residents and that type of thing. So we have a great structure to be able to provide that service. We are in the middle of a capital campaign right now, and I need to close that down soon. Still have another $7 million to go because we want to make sure that Treasure House Phoenix is very financially in good shape, because it'll be my job then. Operations is good. We've gotten the place filled.
Sure.
I have a great COO, that kind of stuff. But now once we've got ourselves fine, I need to turn my attention to, let's find Treasure House number 2, 3, 4.
How can we replicate?
And where? And that's a lot of fundraising for the next thing. When I think about if I was going to take what we had today and what I think we would need to raise to build a new one, I think we need $18 to $20 million.
Okay, wow.
And the thing I would recommend for another community is we need to raise all that up front.
Yeah.
Because being in debt, which we are right now, is not where we need to be.
Right.
It makes it hard.
Yeah.
Especially with interest rates.
Sure.
So that's why we really want to make sure that we're on solid footing financially here. And so that this is, then it's just about operations.
Sure.
Because we'll still need to fundraise the $2 million here.
Yeah.
So, but it's exciting to be able to meet with people that are committed to making that difference, not only in Phoenix, but across the country.
Yeah. The mission is just fantastic, without a doubt. So tell us a little bit about, and we're getting close to the end, but I'd love to hear the stories. So give us a story of just pure inspiration from one of the residents that inspired you in some way that you possibly didn't see coming. So I know I'm throwing you a curveball here, but a story of inspiration where you're like, oh my gosh, that's just, that just blew me away.
So I think I need to talk about Nate.
Okay.
Nate, when he first came to Treasure House, his parents, he grew up in Colorado. Once his parents got him settled at Treasure House, they rented an RV and traveled around the country to decide where they wanted to retire.
Sure.
And they found themselves in Georgia. I'll tell you more about that. But when Nate first came to Treasure House, behaviorally, he was a lot different than he is today. And, he would find himself, really impulsive, those kind of things. And I don't want to say get in trouble a lot, but I mean, trying to manage his behavior, that, he did find himself getting in trouble. And we had to have some serious conversations with him and with his parents in order for him to even stay at Treasure House. So he's gone from that. And this is one of my golf buddies.
Mm-hmm.
So I do play golf. We have a golf program for our residents. And when I play in tournaments, I take the residents with me. That's my golf team. And so I've taught, I have another life coach that really works with the residents on a weekly basis on learning the game of golf. But when I play in tournaments, I wanted them to have the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, especially in scrambles, I'm like, hey guys, we don't have to be good, but we have to play fast.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to teach them it's not all about just hitting the ball, but it's also about being mindful of people around you. It's also about raking bunkers, picking, fixing the greens and being supportive to each other. And so Nate is one of my golf team, part of my golf team. And then, found out that he loved to play the drums.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He ended up getting a really good job. He works for Mr. Shine, and I had told the life coaches for a long time, I get my car washed at this place. I like the culture there.
Yeah.
We need to get Nate there.
Sure.
Of course, we had to go and do everything else because, it was Lauri's idea. And finally they get him there. And this job was a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
The culture at this place, it's family owned.
Mm-hmm.
It's out off of Lake Pleasant. But I love the teamwork.
Sure.
Because I watched that. And I thought this would be a place where our residents could work, where they would be accepted and part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it. Nate now orients new employees.
Wow. That's
he
fantastic.
Is that good that he is a lead.
That's fantastic.
That he is a lead.
Yeah.
And I was talking to his boss. They supported Treasure House too.
Mm-hmm.
They were there at Celebrity Game Night. And they're really right behind him. He said, but there are days, because they all have these walkie-talkies, that, he just makes everybody's day better. He'll start talking, to everybody and being a cheerleader and all of those things. And so, I think I have found for me and anybody involved in Treasure House, and I think, especially for Mr. Shine, where they thought, okay, we're going to do this nice thing for this guy that has a disability, not expecting that what they got back from Nate was so much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
His manners are unbelievable. He's very other-centered. If I'm walking out at the end of the night, Lauri, can I help you carry stuff?
Yeah.
But he has just grown so much in his maturity.
Sure.
And sometimes you have to get out from your parents to get there.
Yeah.
And, to just be coached and mentored in a different way. But I think his employment has been key for everything turning around.
How long has he been there for?
3 years.
Wow.
So proud of him. Just so incredibly proud of him.
Yeah.
And he's always got a smile on his face. His parents were just here. I wanted to take him to dinner, but we couldn't get it to work out. But now they're coming back from Georgia because they're too far away from their kids.
Yeah.
I said, well, you went, California, Denver, Phoenix, Georgia. Okay. But it was a fun experiment.
Totally.
But he has just risen to such greatness. Now, he was the young man that played the drums.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, was he really?
He was the young man that played the drums that he has inspired.
Yeah.
A little 10-year-old boy who's severely, it's Sadie's son, my board member's son, severely autistic. And he inspired him to play.
Wow.
So at our cornhole tournament, we're having the rock and roll band there, and they're doing it for free, and I love them.
Yeah.
So Nate will get to play, and I'm going to have Sadie bring Andrew's drums.
How cool.
So that Andrew can play with Nate.
Right.
How long do the residents stay in your program for?
There's two ways. It can be a transition between, being at home with parents to complete independence, which is what Katie just did.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a number of residents that have done that, or it can be forever home. And what that means is that they can be at Treasure House until they need the medical support of senior living.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just like the same thing as for the rest of us.
Yep.
When we're not a medical facility, it's great that I am a nurse, but we don't provide medical care.
Sure.
But when it comes to that time that they would need senior services, then, when we can no longer provide for them in our current model.
Yeah.
to the next. And it's great because we have a great place next door.
Oh, fantastic.
Your story's been amazing.
It is, right? Yeah. So that's just another fantastic inspirational story from Lauri Tanner, CEO of Treasure House. Tell us how people can reach out to you.
So treasurehouse.org is our website. I think that's the best way. You know, you can see a lot of our stories online. You're able to connect with me through that, or you can give us a call. And but my email address is lauri@treasurehouse.org.
There you go, folks. Again, another episode of Over Coffee with Lauri Tanner. Just fantastic. Thanks, Larry, for hosting with me, and we'll talk to you soon.